"Get out! We don't serve beggars here." The cafe owner's voice echoed across the room as a thin homeless boy stood frozen near the entrance, his hands shaking from the cold. Embarrassed, the boy slowly turned to leave, but as he stepped toward the door, something slipped from his pocket and fell onto the cafe floor. A sealed envelope. The owner picked it up, glanced at the name written on it, and suddenly, the anger on his face disappeared, because the letter was addressed to him. It was a freezing winter evening. Outside, snow quietly covered the sidewalks while people rushed from place to place, trying to escape the cold. Inside the small neighborhood cafe, the atmosphere was warm and comfortable. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air as customers laughed, chatted, and enjoyed their drinks. Then the door slowly creaked open. A young boy stepped inside. He looked about 12 years old. His clothes were old and dusty, and his hair was messy from the wind. His cheeks were red from the freezing air outside. The boy didn't walk to the counter. He didn't ask for food. He simply stood near the door, rubbing his hands together, hoping to warm them for a moment. But the cafe owner, Mr. Daniel, noticed him immediately, and his expression quickly hardened. Mr. Daniel had spent years building his cafe. To him, the place represented hard work, discipline, and reputation. So when he saw the boy standing there, looking homeless and lost, irritation immediately filled his mind. He stepped out from behind the counter. "Hey," Daniel said sharply, "this isn't a shelter." The boy looked down at the floor. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I just wanted to warm my hands for a minute." A few customers nearby glanced over, their expressions softening with sympathy. But Daniel wasn't convinced. "If you're not buying anything," he said firmly, "you can't stay here." The boy nodded slowly. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He simply turned around and began walking toward the door. As he pushed it open, the cold winter wind rushed inside, and at that exact moment, a folded envelope slipped from his pocket and drifted onto the cafe floor. The boy didn't notice. He stepped outside and disappeared into the snowy street. Daniel sighed in annoyance and picked up the envelope. At first, he intended to run outside and return it, but when his eyes landed on the name written across the front, he froze. The envelope read, "To Mr. Daniel Carter." His own name. Confusion replaced his irritation. Why would a homeless boy have a letter meant for him? Daniel looked toward the door again, where the boy had already vanished into the falling snow. Curiosity slowly took over. After a moment of hesitation, Daniel carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Daniel unfolded it and began to read. "Dear Mr. Daniel, you probably don't remember me. 10 years ago, my mother collapsed outside your cafe." Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly as a distant memory began forming in his mind. The letter continued. "Everyone walked past her, except you." Suddenly, the memory returned. It had been a busy afternoon years ago. A woman had fainted on the sidewalk outside his cafe. People had walked around her, too busy with their own lives. But Daniel had rushed outside. He called an ambulance. He stayed with her until help arrived. He even paid part of her hospital bill. At the time, it had simply felt like the right thing to do, and eventually, he had forgotten about it. Daniel continued reading. "My mother always told me you saved her life that day." His hands slowly tightened around the letter. The next sentence made his chest feel heavy. "Before she passed away last month, she asked me to find you and say thank you." Daniel swallowed hard. The final line read, "She said if I was ever lost or alone, I should come to the man who once showed her kindness." Daniel slowly lowered the letter, and suddenly, a terrible realization struck him. The boy he had just thrown out of the cafe was the son of the woman he once saved. Daniel's heart began to pound. Just minutes ago, that boy had been standing right here, cold, hungry, and alone. The same boy who had come all this way just to thank him. But instead of kindness, Daniel had pushed him away. For years, Daniel had proudly told people about the day he helped a stranger. Yet when that stranger's son finally came looking for him, he had failed. Daniel looked out the cafe window. Snow was falling harder now, and the boy was nowhere in sight. A deep wave of guilt rushed through him. Without thinking twice, Daniel grabbed his coat and rushed outside. "Wait!" he shouted into the snowy street. Pedestrians turned to look as he ran down the sidewalk. He searched the street, checking every corner, every bench. Finally, near a bus stop a few blocks away, he spotted a small figure sitting alone. The boy. He was shivering as snowflakes gathered on his shoulders. Daniel slowly approached. The boy looked up, surprised. Daniel caught his breath and said softly, "I'm sorry." The boy said nothing. Daniel held up the letter. "I remember your mother." The boy's eyes widened. "You do?" Daniel nodded gently. "Yes, and she was right about one thing." He gestured toward the cafe down the street. "You shouldn't be out here in the cold." Back inside the cafe, Daniel prepared a hot meal and a cup of cocoa. As the boy wrapped his hands around the warm mug, a small smile finally appeared on his face. And in that quiet moment, Daniel realized something important. Kindness doesn't end with one action. Sometimes, it comes back years later. One small act of kindness can travel farther than we ever imagine. A moment we forget today may become someone else's hope tomorrow. And sometimes, life gives us a second chance to prove that kindness again. So tell me in the comments, what would you have done if you were Daniel? And do you believe one small act of kindness can really change someone's life?